Thanks, Don. It was great. Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody had a nice week, and I'm sure we're all preparing for this week. It's going to be cold. You need to bundle up. Our scripture for today is from the first book of Peter, chapter 5, verse 8. Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. I knew what I wanted to talk about today, and I was trying to figure out the best way to talk about it. And it's about perspective. Perspective is everything when it comes to your faith, our faith. And Job is an excellent example of that. He lost everything. Lost his wealth, lost his kids, lost everything. And he was one of God's most devout followers. And he was well respected. Though he never questioned God, he remained loyal, even when his wife prompted him to disavow God. His friends get involved, and Job rebukes them. Then God arrives in a whirlwind and gives them instructions for the remission of their sin. Job is rewarded handsomely for his faith and is restored many times more than what he had. And I had an epiphany when I was going through this, as I do sometimes when I'm preparing for the sermon. How many times has something happened in our lives and we look up to God and wonder and ask? How many times? I'm sure all of us has had that happen. And I have to tell you that I honestly believe that God's hand is on me when I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to talk about. It's not like I have a scheduled of sermons. I just let the week pass and it comes to me and I determine it. Well, when things happen and we look at God and we wonder and ask him why, the devil's laughing. He's smiling. And he does a little happy dance. Does anyone want to guess why the devil does his happy dance when we ask God those questions? It's because it's not God who's causing these bad things to happen in our lives, it's the devil. When we look to God and ask why, that's actually an implied accusation against God. The devil delights in such sin. The way we view things is based on our experiences. We need to change that act and turn it into one of real faith. And you might ask yourself, how do I do that? Well, first, when something bad happens, we need to consider just how worse it could have been. And then thank God for protecting us from it getting worse. Job is the perfect example for us to realize that fact. And secondly, we need to eventually turn that action into thanking God for the blessings he has bestowed upon us. For instance, you go on a trip and you're at your destination and then the car stops working. Thanks, Lord, for letting me get this far. Didn't want to be stuck in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, wondering what to do. I wasn't prepared for that, but God was. You should pause and remember that you made the entire trip and that you weren't stuck in the middle of nowhere. And that's a huge reason to thank God. Now, I've been up here, I was going to say multiple, but I'm going to say many times now. And I'm sure everyone here remembers my testimony of that job interview I had. It was the perfect job. People were coming in, refinancing their homes. The people that were working to do that were making loads of money. $4,000, $6,000, $8,000. I spoke to the manager. I was the guy. He's like, you're exactly what I need. All you have to do is go and talk to that district manager. interview with him. And I did. And that guy wouldn't hire me. He says, your resume shows you've been hopping around job to job. And I said, well, had you listened, I explained why. Is it not your responsibility to find something better than what you have and verify that it's for you and then move forward? I said, that's how valuable I am. I appreciate the employers that hired me, and because I did so well at my job, others wanted me. I was an asset, and I got paid accordingly. Yeah, well, I'm not hiring you. And as you can remember in that story, I was filled with fury and rage. I was angry. I was worse than a yellow jacket's nest or a hornet's nest. I was fit to be tied. And then, unforeseen to me, because I didn't have the relationship with God that I do today, or the faith required to trust Him, I realized that God was looking out for me the entire time. Because 2 years later, 3 years later, that job overnight was gone. Perspective is essential when it comes to our faith. It's the key to winning with God or giving in to the devil. These few picks, the first ones, will demonstrate the interpretation of that perspective. Now here, those first two picks show the observation of something which would be an interpretation. And instead of talking to each other, they're dead bent on believing that they are right. If we learn more about their perspective, then we stand a better chance of being able to discuss it. There is no God. Oh, yes, there is. We can't expect to change their perspective, but if we give them time to explain it to us, well, wouldn't you think we'd be given the time to explain our perspective to them? And it's possible that by waiting and trying to understand them, that your explanation of your perspective may get them to think and possibly change their mind. This next one, well, actually, it might not change their mind right away. Remember, it's all about planting the seed, and God will do the rest. The next one illustrates positive versus negative. One is happy to have something left. The other is unhappy because it's not full. We should be grateful for what we have and not complain about what we don't have. This next one demonstrates the irony of life. They both long for what the other has, but will he really make them better? They will just inherit the other's perspective given time. I don't know what I was thinking. I had it pretty good before. This next one illustrates the importance of maintaining our faith in God, that He is with us and allowing us these experiences so that we will be prepared for what lies ahead. Now keep in mind, that middle rail is the situation you're going through. And you have two choices. You can move forward with hope or let despair take over. If you let despair take over, then you encounter uncertainty, and then everything has the potential of falling apart with your faith. If you grab with hope and realize that God is with you and God is guiding you, then your belief becomes much stronger, as does your faith in God. Remember, just because we're believers and Christians doesn't mean we're absorbed from having to deal with issues that will challenge our faith. And it's all about the perspective. Now, what prompted this sermon is this next slide. Now, before I show you this next slide, I want you to know that it's extremely important and it demonstrates perspective. Okay? Are you ready for this? Now, I don't want to see a show of hands. I want to ask you, and you can answer silently to yourself. How many read it as, you don't matter, give up? How many read it as, you matter, don't give up? That, my friends, is what I mean by perspective. With the proper perspective, we can maintain and strengthen our faith and relationship with God. In doing so, others will see and potentially become inspired to do the same. And it's not an easy task, by far. I paid to advertise this post on Facebook, okay, to see the responses that I got. And our Facebook page is a public page, so it went out to everybody that, it was not friends only or friends of friends. The majority of the people that responded to that laughed. The laugh emoji. Now, maybe they thought it was humorous. I don't know. And there were some out there that had the heart, some out there that had the caring, and a few that had a like. But what really bothered me, and maybe it shouldn't, but it did, is that the majority of those had the laughing emoji. Now, why would you laugh about that? I don't see anything funny about this at all. I see this as a sign, which is literally what it is. And maybe the person that put that up there did it on purpose so that we could realize how important perspective is. Because most of us read right to left. You don't matter. Give up. But God works in mysterious ways. Oh, did I say right to left? That's... Yes, I am corrected once again. Left to right. But when I showed this to Gina, she read down. I initially read it left to right. And then when she read it down, I'm like, it's right there in front of our eyes. How many times is there something right before our eyes that we don't see it for what it is? Because we're trained to do it a certain way. Left to right. Not down and down. So I think it's important that we all pay attention to what is going on in our lives and to take a step back and say, is this really what this means? And you don't have to do it with everything, but just know that I looked at this and I said, wow, God does work in mysterious ways right in front of our eyes, and half the time we don't even see it because we have the blinders on, because we're trained to think one way. This is the way it's done. And I told this story before. And, well, of course, this is what happens. I start talking, boom, story, okay? My daughter, Whitney, was having problems with her math in 8th grade. And so the math teacher wanted a conference, so I went. And I took my youngest son with me, Tyler, who's 2 years younger than Whitney. And so we sat down. I think it was Mr. Smith. And, I'm like, what seems to be going on? He goes, well, Mr. Wilburn, she's not turning in her homework. And I'm like, Whitney, why? What's going on? It's like, Dad, I just don't understand it. Really? And she's like, yeah, I try. I just don't get it. I said, okay. And I said, well, can I see the last assignment that she was, oh, yeah. And he pulls it out, he looks at it, and I'm looking at it. Tyler's like, let me see that, Dad. Less than 30 seconds, the whole assignment's done. I'm like, how did you do that? Simple, Dad. I looked at Whitney, and she's like, I don't know. I said, neither do I. And I looked at Mr. Smith, and I said, do you have this problem often? He's like, yes. He says, I'll tell you something. Every now and then, I'll ask the students how they came to their solution with a certain problem that I give them. And in most cases, there's typically 4 answers that I expect to hear. But one time, I had this young girl in my class and I asked her how she came to her conclusion. And it was something totally out in left field that I never even considered. But it made sense once I understood it. But it made sense to her in her own way of thinking. And he said, and that's just it. People don't always think the same way. And sometimes they come to their own conclusions based on how they think the problem out. Right here. So, all I can say at this point is we have all the tools that we need. God is with us every single day. We have to accept the fact that He's leading us with both hands, even though we don't understand why. Just to understand this, that is to prepare us for what we're going to deal with down in the future. I'm a living testament of that. Like I said, I never imagined being up before a bunch of people giving sermons. You know, I had myself set on a different path. And all the times that I had set that path, like a boomerang, came right back to square one. Had to start over. But now, I'm on the path I need to be on. Yeah, I'm veering off here, veering off there at times, but ultimately, I'm headed in that direction. And a large part of it is because of my wife, this church, and every single one of you. I don't take credit for it. I credit you all for making this happen. So, with that said, know that